Hey everyone, welcome. I'm absolutely thrilled you're joining me for this explainer today, where we're going to unpack a really comprehensive framework for understanding the human mind. If you've ever found yourself wondering about the fundamental rules that govern our inner lives and how our personal choices kind of ripple out to affect the whole world, well, you are in the exact right place. Today we're exploring a highly structured philosophical text that takes massive, cosmic ideas and breaks them down into a really accessible system. Okay, let's dive right in. The source material we're looking at today is a text titled New Exploration of the Mind, written by Ryuho Okawa. Our goal in this explainer is to impartially map out the theological and philosophical framework the author presents, zooming in specifically on the opening chapter, What is a Righteous Heart? And look, rather than asking you to just blindly accept these concepts as absolute truths, I want to guide you through the author's logic. The author is basically attempting to translate incredibly abstract spiritual concepts into a step-by-step actionable framework for modern people. Here's our roadmap for the explainer. 1. The driver and the car. 2. Defining the ultimate lawmaker. 3. Proofs of the divine. 4. Defining the true dharma. And finally, number 5, the destination of happiness. All right, let's kick things off with section 1, the driver and the car, the vehicle versus the protagonist. So, to really understand the righteous heart, the text first asks us to consider the basic workings of human life using a pretty brilliant metaphor. It argues that your physical body is merely a vehicle, right? Titles, fame, wealth, outward beauty, these are literally just the make and model of the car. They're the shiny bumper and the fresh paint job, but your mind, the mind is the driver. The mind is the actual protagonist of your life's journey. I mean, you could see a 20 million yen luxury sports car flying down the highway, but if the driver is terrible and constantly swerving into the wrong lane, it's incredibly dangerous. The car's outward appearance definitely gets a lot of our attention, but what's really interesting here is that acquiring accurate traffic knowledge and the driving skills to match is the single most important thing. And that brings us to a huge question in our journey. If a good driver is simply someone who follows the traffic rules, knowing when to stop at a red light and when to go on a green, we have to ask, who exactly wrote the rulebook? What defines official correctness on the road of life? This question is where the text pivots directly from human psychology straight into theology. Which leads us to section 2, defining the ultimate lawmaker, the source of the rules. If there are these cosmic traffic laws that our minds, our internal drivers, are supposed to follow, the text argues there has to be an ultimate author of those laws, which it identifies as God. Now, the author brilliantly illustrates this using a triad of definitions to conceptualize the lawmaker. First, God is defined philosophically as the first cause. Basically, if you exist because of your parents and they exist because of theirs, logic dictates there must be a starting point. Second, God is defined as a transcendent force capable of performing miracles, things that totally bypass human understanding. And third, stepping away from just an abstract force, God is defined as a personal God, possessing a noble character and intentionality. Moving right along to section 3, proofs of the divine, evidence of the lawmaker. Now, you might be wondering, how does the author justify these claims? Well, the text outlines 3 core proofs for the existence of this divine author. The first argument is causality. There is a fundamental basis for everything in this world being created, so the whole chain of cause and effect has to eventually trace back to a creator. Next is the undeniable existence of phenomena that simply cannot be explained by modern science. And finally, there's a historical proof, pointing out that the absolute most towering figures in human history, the giants of philosophy and spirituality, have overwhelmingly acknowledged the existence of a higher divine power. All right, section 4, defining the true dharma, the rules of the road. Okay, so we've established the lawmaker, now we can look at the laws themselves, the exact traffic rules for our inner driver. In the context of this source material, the term used is true dharma. So the crucial point is that true dharma represents the righteous laws and teachings that flow directly from the divine to guide the actions of humanity. It is the official rulebook for the mind. But with so many philosophies and teachings out there in the world, the text acknowledges we desperately need a way to filter what is truly correct. To solve this, the author gives us a 3-part test to identify true dharma. First, a true teaching must be consistent with the vast intellectual heritage of humanity's past. It shouldn't completely contradict the foundational wisdom we've already inherited. Second, it has to involve some phenomena that go totally beyond human comprehension, pointing to a source way higher than just human intelligence. Third, and this is a really fascinating balance, it must still offer a theory that appeals to the intellect and reason of modern people. It can't just demand blind faith. It has to be rational and without contradiction. Let's move to our final part, Section 5. The destination of happiness, the pursuit of a righteous heart. So now that we understand the driver, the lawmaker, and the rules of the road, what is the actual point of the journey? The text defines the pursuit of a righteous heart not as some passive state of being, but as an active, continuous journey. It's the process of learning the standard of righteousness, those cosmic traffic laws, and gradually creating and molding your inner self to actually align with those rules. And the ultimate goal of this personal alignment is much, much larger than just the individual. It's the method to actively develop and harmonize the entire world created by the divine. As you'll see, this process unfolds across two connected levels of happiness. First is private happiness. This happens when your individual mind aligns with those righteous laws. The result? You achieve personal peace. You become a highly skilled driver who navigates the road of life smoothly. But it doesn't stop there. This naturally expands into public happiness, spreading that righteous alignment throughout society. The ultimate result is progress, total world harmony, and the collective development of humanity. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, all the way from the vehicle of the physical body to the cosmic rules governing our minds and society. Based on the framework we just explored, I want to leave you with one big question to chew on. If your mind is the driver and your body is just the car, how are your driving skills in the journey of life? Are you paying attention to the rules of the road? Keep exploring, keep learning, and thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Welcome back to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into a dilemma that, let's be real, pretty much every single one of us has bumped into at some point. We're talking about the deep, often frustrating challenge of balancing our highest spiritual truths with the very concrete, inescapable material realities of our bank accounts and our love lives. The text we're unpacking today is called New Exploration of the Mind, and it zeroes right in on the human mind and those everyday worries we all carry. What's absolutely fascinating here is how it maps out the historical tension between chasing a higher spiritual path and, just trying to survive and thrive in the physical world. It's a tug-of-war humanity has been wrestling with for literally millennia. So, the big question is this. Is it actually possible to seek deep spiritual truth while still caring about your bank account and your love life? I mean, it's a completely universal struggle. We all want that sense of higher purpose, right? But we also have bills to pay, taxes to file, and relationships to navigate. So do these two worlds really have to be at war with each other? Here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover 1. Spirit versus real life. 2. Money and relationship worries. 3. Shakyamuni's historical struggles. 4. Asceticism or the middle way. 5. The limits of the past. And 6. Modern solutions for today. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Spirit versus real life. The source text points out that even the absolute greatest historical figures grappled with this exact contradiction between truth and real life. Take Jesus, for instance. He talked about how you can't serve both God and the god of mammon, essentially the god of money and worldly wealth. But then, when he was asked about paying taxes, he famously said to render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. This just brilliantly captures that friction, doesn't it? Trying to hold on to pure spiritual teachings while still having to handle the actual physical currency of the government just to get by. Moving right into Section 2, Money and Relationship Worries. Now, we can really break these universal hurdles down into two massive categories. First up, we've got economic worries. The text makes a really pragmatic point here that propagating truth actually requires Caesar's coin to survive. Think about it. Churches need repairs, taxes have to be paid, and even truth preachers need to buy daily clothes and, fund their kids' schooling. It is a completely tangible necessity. Then, on the other side, we have opposite sex worries or relationship issues. These are the internal, psychological challenges of romantic attachment, human desire, and just the overall distraction that comes with interpersonal relationships. It begs the question, how do you maintain your spiritual focus when your mind is entirely occupied by someone else? Which brings us to Section 3. Shakyamuni's historical struggles. To see just how disruptive these issues can be, the text gives us this fascinating historical look at how Shakyamuni tried to manage economic and opposite-sex issues within his ancient Buddhist community. So, in Era 1, he initially just barred women from the order entirely. He was afraid that romantic interest would totally destroy the monks' focus. Then, in Era 2, after some pretty earnest pleas, women were admitted, but the camps were strictly segregated into monks and nuns to prevent any interaction. But check out Era 3. Despite that strict segregation, persistent disharmony, distraction, and rule breaking just kept happening, which eventually led to expulsions. It turns out the fundamental human drive for connection was just way too strong to be legislated away. Let's look at how he tried to solve this in Section 4, asceticism, or the middle way. The source actually outlines the evolution of Shakyamuni's problem-solving approach here. Step 1 was what they called the method of cutting off attachment, and this was the aggressive approach. Reject all worldly ties, wear rags, eat only what's given to you, and completely sever all relationships to avoid suffering. Basically, just cut it all off. But when that proved a bit too restrictive, his thinking evolved into Step 2, the method of entering the middle way. To explain this middle way, the source uses a really brilliant, highly relatable analogy. It's all about finding a realistic balance between extremes. So it's avoiding the total luxury of eating a massive, lavish steak every single day. Because, let's face it, that ruins your health and totally empties your wallet. But it's also avoiding the miserable extreme of eating nothing but pickled radishes, which is just going to leave you too weak to accomplish anything at all. The middle way is about finding that sustainable vitality while still pursuing truth. But there's a catch, which we'll cover in Section 5, the limits of the past. The text makes a really clear argument here about human development. It points out that the middle way, at least as it was historically practiced by simply cutting off attachment, actually completely lacks the idea of development. Think about it for a second. If everyone just abandons wealth, ambition, and society to go sit in a cave and meditate, human progress comes to a screeching halt. We'd never build better infrastructure, we wouldn't advance our technology, and we definitely wouldn't create a thriving society. Strict asceticism essentially denies the value and the potential of the physical world we actually live in. So, that brings us to a really critical question. If complete detachment stops human progress, but total indulgence leads us into what the text warns could be a hell of lust or just sheer financial ruin, well, how do we actually apply this balance in the modern world? How are we supposed to navigate this right now, today? And that leads us perfectly into Section 6, Modern Solutions for Today. The text lays out a very clear, modern set of criteria. The foundational idea here is that money is fundamentally neutral. It's neither good nor evil, it's literally just a tool. Having a certain amount of financial leisure is actually completely acceptable, good even, if your purpose is right. Similarly, romantic relationships aren't these inherently evil distractions anymore. They are accepted and even encouraged if they're aligned with the path of truth. Ultimately, the text argues that strict, rigid asceticism is just unnatural for modern human beings. We really need a better, more practical way to interact with the world. And this brilliantly illustrates the modern approach to using wealth to save time and effort. The source gives us some fantastic analogies here. It says money is totally acceptable, even necessary, if it's used to, say, buy a filing cabinet to organize a chaotic office so you can actually work better. Or, if you need to cross an ocean, spending money on a fast boat is obviously much better than trying to swim the whole way. You're spending money to buy time and efficiency for a righteous, productive purpose. And that is what makes it good money. Now, that exact same modern pragmatism applies to relationships. The text that stands on love is that men and women who share a common purpose, a shared path of truth, should absolutely be accepted. A romantic relationship is not a spiritual distraction if both partners are aligned in actively supporting each other toward a higher shared goal. In fact, tackling all those messy complexities of life together is presented here as a really beautiful, unifying modern ideal. So, we're going to wrap up today's explainer with this thought. If both money and love are fundamentally neutral, if they are really just tools at your disposal, are you using yours to build a better world and elevate your purpose? Or are you just letting them distract you from what actually matters? It's a pretty powerful lens to view your daily life and your goals through, don't you think? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope it gives you a fresh, focused perspective on balancing your spirit with your everyday reality.
All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely wild, a literal hero's journey for your mind. You know, it's crazy when you think about it. Our brains are basically hardwired to just keep us alive, right? Like literally burning through about 20% of our daily calories just for baseline survival. But at the same time, we have this massive, undeniable drive to ask the biggest questions imaginable. Who are we? Why are we here? And what exactly separates us from everything else on the planet? So we're going to look through a really structured philosophical framework that maps out that entire path, going straight from our basic survival instincts all the way up to ultimate spiritual liberation. Let's get right into it. So the source material we're pulling from today is this foundational text, New Exploration of the Mind by Ryuho Okawa. And what's really fascinating about this book is how it acts as a comprehensive guide. Honestly, it's almost like a textbook for the soul. It systematically breaks down the incredibly complex workings of the human mind. So our goal today is to basically distill the core truths found in these pages, specifically zooming in on the various aspects of the mind, and give them to you in a clear, completely actionable way. All right, here's our roadmap for the journey today. 1. Humans versus animals. 2. Defining human nature. 3. The 3 bondages holding us back. 4. Breaking self-preservation. And 5. Cultivating a good mind.
Okay, kicking things off with Section 1, Humans versus Animals.
To really grasp what it means to be human, we've got to start with a basic question. What actually separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom? I mean, animals are driven pretty much entirely by adapting to their environment, right? A lion seeks out its prey for the day. A bear instinctively knows to hibernate. A mole just finds comfort underground. They exist in their environment without ever really questioning it. But humans, we look at that exact same environment and we go, why? We ask why the oceans exist, what the stars mean. While animals are totally content just to survive, the human mind is uniquely wired to explore its own secrets. We just have this built-in, profound sense of purpose.
Moving on to Section 2, Defining Human Nature.
So, if our whole purpose is to seek out meaning, how do we actually define the essence of this human condition? Well, throughout history, some of the greatest mentors have taken a swing at this. First up, we've got the 17th century philosopher Blaise Pascal, who famously said, "The human is a thinking reed." And really think about what that means. If you compare us to the massive, sweeping forces of nature, our physical bodies are pretty much as fragile as a tiny reed blowing in the wind. But, and here's the kicker, we aren't just a reed, we are a thinking reed. Pascal is basically arguing that our ability to ponder our own existence, that's our true essence. Our real strength isn't physical at all, it's entirely mental.
Now let's jump back to ancient Greece and see how this idea builds. Socrates defined humans as lovers of wisdom because he recognized something huge. No animal loves knowledge just for the sake of having knowledge, but humans, we actively chase it. And this is absolutely crucial. Loving knowledge is the foundational condition for all of culture and civilization. Without that love of wisdom, human life would literally be completely devoid of civilization. We'd be virtually indistinguishable from animals, just acting on instinct.
Finally, let's look at Shakyamuni Buddha, and his definition takes us even deeper, right into the spiritual realm. For Buddha, humans are beings seeking enlightenment. So the ultimate goal isn't just piling up intellectual facts, but actually achieving spiritual liberation, like discovering your true, unburdened self. Buddha taught that humans are inherently free and incredibly powerful spiritual beings, but, well, we've kind of forgotten this, and our whole journey is driven by the need to remember it.
Which brings us to Section 3, The 3 Bondages.
So you might be wondering, if we're meant to be these incredibly powerful, enlightened beings, why do we constantly feel so trapped and stressed out? Enter the villains of our story, the 3 bondages. Let's walk through these chains. Step 1 is the big foundational error, believing that your physical body is your true essence. When you think, "I am only my body," you immediately become a slave to physical desires. And that naturally bleeds into Step 2. Because you think this 3D physical world is all there is, you start desperately chasing worldly greatness, status, job titles, societal recognition. And finally, Step 3. All this worldly attachment breeds this selfish desire to constantly be praised and to take from others rather than to give. Before you know it, you are completely trapped in your own ego.
All right, Section 4, Breaking Self-Preservation.
Now, all 3 of these bondages actually share one common underlying root, and that is the overwhelming desire for self-preservation. I mean, let me ask you directly, how much of your daily energy is spent just trying to protect your ego, or maintain your physical comfort, or secure your social standing? It's a lot, right? So how do we actually break these chains of self-preservation to achieve true freedom? Because when we're constantly bound by the need to protect our physical and social selves, our minds get restricted and we completely lose touch with our original expansive nature. The answer to breaking those chains is the concept of enlightenment. And in this context, enlightenment isn't just, sitting quietly in a room somewhere. It is the active shattering of the illusions of the material world. It's that exact moment you finally cut through the heavy anchor of self-preservation.
When you stop obsessing over your physical survival and your societal ego, you suddenly discover your true self. You realize you're not just some fragile body, but a completely free, immensely powerful spiritual being, capable of boundless thought and creation.
Let's head into our final part, Section 5, Cultivating a Good Mind.
Understanding enlightenment conceptually is super liberating, but how do we actually apply this day to day? According to the source text, living as a truly awakened human means you have to actively engage with two fundamental pillars of the mind. First, there's the exploration of humanity. This is the inward journey to really understand your true spiritual self by stripping away all that ego. And second, the elucidation of the world. This is the outward journey to understand why the universe exists in the first place and exactly how you fit into its grand design. Your mind was literally given to you specifically to tackle these two massive, beautiful assignments.
To navigate those two pillars, we can actually synthesize the wisdom of history's greatest mentors to cultivate what's called a good mind. From Socrates, we take the intense pursuit of wisdom. From Confucius, we borrow the dedication to building really high moral character. From Jesus Christ, we learn the ultimate power of loving our neighbors as ourselves. And from Buddha, we take boundless compassion. When you build a mind on these principles, it becomes incredibly constructive, rich, and deeply beneficial to the world. It is the complete opposite of that destructive, ego-driven mind we talked about earlier.
And when you start cultivating a mind like that, you acquire a correct worldview. You realize this profound truth. The universe we live in is absolutely not a random accident. The stars, the earth, humanity, none of it is a coincidence. There is a massive, divine intention behind the whole shebang. And that purpose really boils down to two main forces, progress and harmony. The universe basically demands that we continuously move forward, evolve, and grow. That's the progress part. But we have to do it in a way that unites us and brings peace, and that is harmony. Our individual minds are deeply, deeply connected to this larger cosmic purpose.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway from this explainer. I want you to take a hard look at your own life. Are you living like an animal, just reacting and adapting to your environment, surviving day to day, all tangled up in worldly status and the constant need to be praised? Or are you ready to finally break those three bondages of self-preservation? You literally have a profound, eternal universe sitting right there inside your own mind, just waiting to be explored. The choice of whether to stay tethered to the ground or to really soar toward progress and harmony, that's entirely up to you. Keep exploring, keep asking why, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.
Welcome to this explainer. Okay, picture this. Have you ever reached the end of a totally regular Tuesday and, for no particular reason at all, your mind just feels incredibly heavy? You haven't run a marathon, you haven't solved a global crisis, but mentally you are just completely drained. It's a universal, highly relatable problem. Honestly, just from living our daily lives, interacting with people, and absorbing a constant stream of information, mental clutter silently builds up. So today, we are going to explore a highly structured, super fascinating method for sweeping away all that mental debris so you can reclaim your focus. The source material for our explainer today is a really insightful text called The New Exploration of the Mind by Ryuho Okawa. We're going to impartially explore the concepts presented in this book, specifically focusing on Chapter 4, which outlines a very practical, step-by-step framework for diagnosing and clearing out the psychological dust that just naturally gathers in our minds over time. So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the cluttered mind, the reflection framework, view, speech, and thought, livelihood, action and progress, mindfulness and concentration, and we'll wrap it all up with the right mind. Let's get right into it. Starting us off with Section 1, the cluttered mind, the accumulation of daily dust. All right, to really grasp this, we first need to normalize that feeling of an overwhelmed mind. The source text suggests it's simply a byproduct of existing in the modern world. Ask yourself this: what happens to a brand new car if you drive it every single day but never, ever wash it? Just picture that for a second. It's a brilliant analogy from the text, right? You drive through a city, you're going to gather dirt, grime, and exhaust. Even if you're not going off-roading, a layer of film just builds up. Well, our minds work the exact same way. Just navigating traffic, absorbing stressful news, or dealing with a tough day leaves a residue. The book points out that just like you wouldn't expect a car to stay pristine without a good wash, or a window to stay clear without being wiped down, we actually have to actively and intentionally clean our minds of this worldly dust. If we don't, we're basically navigating life looking through a filthy windshield. Moving right along to Section 2, the reflection framework, the eightfold path. So, if accumulated mental dust is the problem, what exactly is the soap and water? The text defines purification of the mind quite literally as the act of removing this mental dirt. The tool for the job? The Eightfold Path, a method originally advocated by Shakyamuni Buddha. But here's the really cool part. It's not presented as some rigid ancient dogma. Instead, it's a super practical method for daily reflection. Think of it as a structured car wash for the soul, a literal checklist of 8 criteria to review your day against. That brings us to Section 3, View, Speech, and Thought, Internal and External Clarity. Okay, let's break down this first group. This is all about how we perceive the world, how we communicate, and our inner monologue. Step 1 is right view. This basically means looking back at your day and asking, did I see things objectively? Did I maybe misread a situation because of my own bias? Step 2 is right speech. This one is absolutely huge. It means being acutely aware of what you're saying. The text really emphasizes that our words are the easiest way we create clutter for ourselves and the people around us. And then step 3 is right thought, which means shining a light on what's swirling around in your head before it even becomes speech. Let's zoom in on right speech for a moment. There's this incredibly powerful quote in the text. People unknowingly become perpetrators through their words, unexpected to the one who spoke them. I mean, wow, really take a second to chew on that. Have you ever carelessly snapped at a coworker or made a sarcastic joke that just totally landed wrong? The text argues that the person talking often has no clue they've caused harm, but for the listener, it can leave a lasting mark. Reflecting on our speech helps us catch these blind spots before that clutter compounds. Now, turning inward to right thought. This is where we confront those unspoken anxieties or resentments. The source material uses such a beautiful metaphor here. It compares pent-up emotions to a tangled ball of yarn right in your chest. If you just yank at it violently, the knots only get tighter, right? So, right thought is the deliberate, patient process of unspooling that yarn. You go thread by thread through calm reflection until those emotional knots finally loosen up and release. Next up is Section 4, Livelihood, Action, and Progress, Aligning Daily Life. All right, so now the framework shifts our focus outward. How are we conducting our routines, our careers, and our life's overall trajectory? Step 4 is right livelihood, which is all about the core integrity of your daily routine. Step 5 is right action. In a modern context, the text defines this as improving the quality and service of your daily work. It makes you ask, did I actually provide excellent service today, or did I just do the bare minimum? Then we hit step 6, right progress. This represents that continuous push for personal growth. Are you actively learning? Are you applying wisdom to build a better future? To make right livelihood super practical, the source gives us a really handy evening checklist. You basically ask yourself a few questions at the end of the day. Was my time used efficiently today, or did I just squander it? Did I live cheerfully and brightly, or was I a dark cloud dragging everyone down? And was my day aligned with a higher divine will, or was I operating purely on selfish ego, just trying to get ahead? It totally transforms a lofty spiritual concept into a very actionable daily self-audit. Let's move to Section 5, Mindfulness and Concentration, Finding the Center. So we have washed the surface, we've organized our actions, and now we are getting into the deepest level of mental purification. Step 7 is right mindfulness. The text describes this as keeping your thoughts moving with a clear, deliberate direction. You're actively steering your mind rather than just letting it drift aimlessly. And this active steering is exactly what preps you for the final step in the framework. Step 8, right concentration. So what actually is right concentration? Well, the text explains it as the active practice of taking dedicated time every single day to quiet your breathing and maintain a truly peaceful mind. It's about finding that state of mental unity. The author makes a really crucial point here. If you don't take that quiet time away from the chaotic noise of the world to reflect and connect spiritually, the rest of the path is kind of incomplete. This is that final deep, clean rinse that washes away all the dust you've just loosened up. And finally, Section 6, the right mind beyond the clean window. Now, you might be wondering, why go through all this rigorous mental cleaning every single day? What is the actual endgame here? The source material makes a really vital distinction. On one side, you have the clouded mind, weighed down, reactive, and completely obscured by that unexamined daily dust. On the other side, the purified mind. But here's the kicker. The text argues that achieving a purified mind isn't actually the final destination. It's just the absolute necessary prerequisite to exploring your true human potential. Think about it. You can't chart a course to the stars if your spaceship's window is caked in mud. Washing the mind simply gives you the clarity you need to start the real exploration of your life's purpose. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a direct challenge right from the pages of this framework. Tonight, before your head hits the pillow, which of these 8 paths are you going to reflect on? Will you untangle that yarn of right thought? Will you do a quick audit of your right speech? The tools to clear the clutter are literally right in your hands. Thank you so much for joining me today. And hey, here's to a clearer, brighter mind.
Welcome back to the explainer. Okay, today we're looking at a text that's basically going to shatter our baseline assumptions about consciousness. We're diving into ideas so profound, they just might completely change the way you view your own existence. We are breaking down the esoteric framework presented in a fascinating source called The New Exploration of the Mind. We'll be unpacking its deep dive into the true nature of the human mind, the multi-layered soul, and the absolute mysteries of what actually happens to us when we go to sleep. It's a journey that challenges pretty much everything modern materialism tells us.
Before we really get going, I want you to ask yourself a pretty wild question. Are you truly awake right now? Or is this life just a temporary hibernation? Because this source material proposes an answer that might flip your entire worldview upside down. If you think your waking life right now is the ultimate reality, well, you are in for a massive paradigm shift. So today we'll be deconstructing the illusion of reality, exploring the anomaly of sleep, and revealing the multi-layered human soul.
Part 1. The hardware and the user. Right off the bat, the text argues for a fundamental separation between the mind and the brain. Basically, your brain isn't actually generating your consciousness. Instead, think of your brain as merely a biological computer terminal. It's just the hardware. Your mind? That's the actual operator, the user sitting at the keyboard. It's a complete departure from the idea that we are purely just our physical biology. Think about it like this. What happens if the brain is damaged? It's exactly like having a broken keyboard or a glitching monitor. The user, your mind or soul, is still perfectly fine and fully intact. It just can't communicate its thoughts properly into our three-dimensional physical world because its terminal is broken. The software is flawless, the hardware is just acting up. So, if the mind is just a user sitting at a desk, what exactly is going on when that biological computer goes into sleep mode for 8 hours every single night? It's a biological mystery that demands a closer look.
Which brings us to part 2, where we go during sleep.
If we map out the scientific sleep cycle, we see our brainwaves changing drastically every 1 to 2 hours, right? And during paradoxical or REM sleep, where the brain is highly active but the body is physically paralyzed, the mind isn't just randomly firing off chaotic images. Something incredibly active and deeply purposeful is happening beneath the surface.
The source proposes something much deeper. The user has actually stepped away from the terminal, literally. The soul leaves the physical body to return to the spirit world. And honestly, this perfectly explains why someone in deep sleep doesn't react if you pinch their arm or call their name. The terminal is powered on, the heart is beating, but the operator, they're completely out of the office.
All right, let's move to part 3, the great paradigm flip.
Now, the framework here argues that our definitions of reality are, well, totally backward. We just naturally assume this physical earth is the real world, and dreams are just fleeting illusions. But what if this earthly life is actually the temporary dream state? What if the spirit world is our true, permanent waking reality? It's an inversion that forces you to question everything.
The text uses this amazing winter bear analogy. It points out that our physical lives are just a brief, necessary period of hibernation. Just like a bear sleeps in a cave for a few months out of the year, an earthly life of 60 or 70 years, that's just a short nap from the perspective of our infinite, eternal souls. We come here, we hibernate, and then we wake back up. You know those hyper-vivid dreams where you feel completely 100% awake? Maybe you're visiting familiar, profoundly beautiful places. Well, the text claims you are actually briefly waking up in your true spiritual home, kind of touching base with spiritual peers who check on your earthly progress before you have to go back to sleep in your physical body in the morning.
Part 4, redefining the human soul.
People get so bogged down in the terminology here. Is it the mind, the spirit, the soul? Fundamentally, these words refer to the exact same central entity. But, and this is key, this entity isn't just some shapeless, floating ghost. It possesses a highly structured, complex anatomy that operates far beyond our visible spectrum.
Actually, the soul is constructed in multiple dimensional layers. It starts from our outermost three-dimensional physical body. Inside that, there's a four-dimensional astral body. Deeper still is the five-dimensional spiritual body,
going all the way inward toward higher dimensional photon bodies. Your consciousness is an incredibly complex vehicle built to navigate totally different states of existence.
The Source beautifully explains this with the parable of the bamboo shoot. Just like peeling the sheaths off a shoot to reach the core, ascending spiritual dimensions requires shedding layers. Physical death is really just shedding that outermost 3D layer. And here is a deeply crucial insight from the text. As we shed these layers, the physical, then the astral, we strip away worldly discrimination and societal labels. Down at our innermost spiritual core, all souls share a profound equality. Enlightenment is literally just the ultimate realization of that deeply rooted equality.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder. If everything we've explored today is true, if your body's just hardware, if this life is literally just a brief winter's nap, and if shedding our outer layers reveals our ultimate shared equality, what exactly is your multi-layered soul preparing to do when the real morning finally comes? Thanks for tuning into this explainer, and keep questioning the nature of your reality.
Welcome to the Explainer. So, have you ever just looked around at your life, maybe after a really long week or a weird string of bad luck, and felt this huge universal sense of frustration? You know, that creeping, super uncomfortable feeling that you're just entirely out of control? Like you're nothing but a passive passenger, just reacting to the crazy circumstances, the difficult people, and the chaotic events getting thrown your way. Well, it's a completely common human experience. But what if I told you there's actually a direct, incredibly logical way to reclaim your agency? And the crazy part? The mechanism to do it is literally sitting right inside your head. Today, we're diving deep into the profound mechanics of human consciousness. Using some absolutely fascinating insights from our source material, New Exploration of the Mind, we're going to unpack what's basically the unseen engine of reality. Get ready, because truly understanding this changes everything about how you navigate your daily life.
But before we get into the nuts and bolts of how this engine actually operates, we need to set the stage with a massive philosophical question. What truly makes us human? It's a question the greatest thinkers have wrestled with for centuries, right? Is it our physical bodies, the fact that we walk upright? Is it our complex cities, our art, or all the advanced tools we build? To really grasp the immense power of our minds, we first have to agree on what actually constitutes our core identity. Okay, let's dive into this. The source text brings up a very famous, very poignant quote from the 17th century philosopher Blaise Pascal. He said, "Man is but a reed, the most feeble thing in nature, but he is a thinking reed." The text uses this idea to establish a really critical foundational premise. Thought is the true essence of humanity. It's the absolute core attribute that separates us from the rest of the natural world. We aren't just biological bodies blindly bumping into things in our environment. Our primary defining nature is that we are thinking beings. That is our true essence.
Section 1. Essence of Human Thought.
Now, we need to be really careful here. What does the word thought actually mean in the context of this explainer? Because in our modern, fast-paced world, we usually treat thoughts as passive, fleeting little sparks in our brains. You know, a random daydream, a passing worry, a quick idea about what to grab for lunch. We treat them like they're totally harmless and insubstantial. But we have to stop viewing our minds as just passive observers. And this brings us to the absolute core concept today, the dynamics of the mind, or in the original Japanese, kokoro no rigigak. The central principle here is that thoughts are not passive at all. Actually, quite the opposite. They are highly active, deeply creative, and profoundly energetic forces. They literally possess the capability to create reality and to destroy it. The text calls this unseen energetic force nen, which roughly translates to thought energy, or the intense power of the focused mind. It's an actual, unseen engine, constantly humming in the background of your existence, pumping out very real energy.
Let's move on to Section 2. Thought as Creative Power.
If thought is an actual energy, a dynamic, moving force, what is it actually doing? Let's look at the literal capabilities of this thought energy, or nen. According to the text, in the spiritual or multidimensional realms, this energy is instant and obvious. If you think of a building, boom, your thought energy creates it right there. If you wish to travel across space, your thought instantly moves you there. It creates reality, it drives action, and it can build up incredible structures or wipe them out in a flash. Now here is the huge secret the text reveals. This exact same force is constantly operating right here on Earth, in our physical world. The only difference? The physical density of our three-dimensional world just slows the process down. You might not instantly materialize a skyscraper out of thin air, but the creative and destructive power of your persistent thoughts is still very much at work, gradually, but very surely, shaping your reality day by day.
Which brings us to section 3, mind reflects in appearance.
And just a quick reminder, all of these profound insights into the mind-body connection and the laws of spiritual physics come directly from our source material, New Exploration of the Mind. This text really acts as a structured blueprint for understanding how our unseen thoughts dictate our seen reality.
To really grasp the magnitude of this, we need to bridge our internal and external worlds. We need to look at how our invisible thoughts quite literally change the physical vehicle we inhabit. This introduces the concept of the non-duality of form and mind, a principle known as Shikishin Funi. This idea completely shatters the illusion that your mind and your body are separate things. It reveals that your internal states, your persistent thoughts, your hidden intentions, your everyday moods, are intimately connected to your external form. Specifically, your physical appearance and your expressions. They aren't two separate entities. They're literally two sides of the exact same coin. Over time, your dominant thoughts permanently mold your physical appearance. A mind filled with anger over years will physically reshape the microexpressions and the actual structural resting state of your face.
And that leads to a pretty famous and honestly somewhat intimidating rule highlighted in the text. Once you hit age 40, you become entirely responsible for your own face. Why 40? Well, because by the time you reach 40, your face is no longer just the product of the genetics you were born with or the youth you enjoyed. It has become a perfect, undeniable physical manifestation of 40 years of your inner thoughts. It is the carved, sculpted result of the unseen engine of your mind. If you've held on to resentment, it shows. If you've cultivated joy, it shines right through. You literally cannot fake it anymore.
This makes perfect, logical sense when you zoom out and consider the broader spiritual laws the text outlines. In the spiritual realm, your true form simply cannot be hidden. The text plainly states, angels appear as angels, and demons appear as demons. You can't mask your inner reality when you shed the physical body. And honestly, even here on Earth, don't we see glimpses of this all the time? Think about it. You can almost instantly spot the intense, structured aura of a strict teacher or feel the heavy, dark atmosphere of a deeply angry person just by observing their mannerisms or looking in their eyes. Ultimately, our true internal state will be completely impossible to hide.
All right, section 4, the law of wavelengths. So, if our thoughts are powerful enough to physically shape our biological faces over time, how do they shape the broader events, the successes and the failures in our lives? This introduces a massive, life-altering concept that brilliantly illustrates the physics of the spiritual world and how it translates to our reality through magnetic fields. Here are the mechanics of attraction, laid out step by step. Step 1, your internal thoughts emit a specific, measurable frequency or wavelength. Step 2, these frequencies constantly seek out matching vibrations in the world around you. And Step 3, the golden rule. Like attracts like, drawing in matching circumstances and matching people. If your internal engine is emitting a wavelength of chronic frustration, you literally become a walking magnet seeking out frustrating events, traffic jams, and frustrating people just to fulfill that frequency. But here is the absolute beauty of this law. You can use it deliberately. The text gives these fascinating examples of how individuals tune their mental radio dial. If you want to receive high-level inspiration from a figure like Jesus, you have to elevate your mind to match his frequency of love and sacrifice. If you want communication from Buddha, you must match his frequency of enlightenment and peace. The exact same thing applies to creativity. Novelists, artists, and creators don't just invent things out of thin air. They actually tune their minds to the precise spiritual realm that holds the inspiration they're seeking. You can only catch the broadcast if your internal dial is turned to the exact right wavelength.
Moving into Section 5, Overcoming Negative Mental Energy. Now, knowing these incredible laws of attraction and magnetism is hugely empowering, for sure. But it also brings up a very practical question. How do we protect ourselves in a chaotic world that's often filled with negative energy, harsh criticism, and just generally bad moods from other people? The text lays out a bold, inescapable rule to address this: the law of action and reaction. Good causes yield good results. Seeds sown must be harvested. This applies perfectly to the inescapable nature of our mental energy output. You simply cannot escape the physics of your own mind. Whatever thought energy, good or bad, you push out into the world will inevitably produce a corresponding result that you, and only you, have to eventually deal with. The source text gives us a really powerful comparison here: the mind of criticism versus the power of patience. Emitting a critical, highly negative wavelength is fundamentally destructive. The text notes that when large groups of people emit critical thoughts, say against a public figure, it can act like a dark cloud of energy, sometimes even causing physical illness or misfortune for the target. It's a very real, very dark energy. But on the flip side, standing against this destructive force, we have the ultimate protective shield, cultivating patience, which is often referred to in the text as endurance or forbearance.
So, how do we practically apply this shield? What's the ultimate defensive mechanism when you feel like you're under attack? Here is how you fight evil thoughts. First rule: never ever align with the wavelength of a negative thought. If someone sends anger your way and you get angry back, boom, you've just matched their frequency and absorbed the hit. Second rule: fight evil thoughts with good thoughts. The text is totally clear on the physics of this. Without a matching frequency on your end, the negative energy literally has nowhere to land. It cannot attach to you. So what happens? It simply bounces off and returns right back to its sender. By maintaining a positive, patient wavelength, you effectively make yourself completely bulletproof to negativity.
All of this brings us to a really powerful, undeniable realization. You are the sole driver of this unseen engine. Your thoughts aren't just passive observations. They are actively designing your reality, your circumstances, and even your physical body right at this very second. So I want to leave you with a massive question to ponder today. Based on your current dominant mental wavelength, the thoughts you are thinking every single day, what will your face and your life look like in 10 years? Is it going to be a masterpiece of patience and positivity, or something else entirely? Take control of your unseen engine, keep consciously tuning that mental dial, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're taking a really profound philosophical text and bringing its core concepts to life. We're going to explore a truly fascinating framework all about the true nature of human consciousness. You know, if you've ever felt like your own mind is just this complicated, confusing place, I think you're absolutely going to love the breakdown we have for you today. The source material we're looking at proposes something incredible, that your mind isn't just a chaotic jumble of random thoughts, but actually possesses this hidden, highly organized architecture. Okay, let's dive into this.
So think about the intricate geometry of human consciousness. Our source text uses this powerful visual metaphor, portraying the mind not as a flat, one-dimensional surface, but as a series of deeply nested layers. And this is huge, right? Because we so often get completely caught up in the modern world. We're constantly dealing with technology, reacting to the news cycle, just managing the daily grind. And because of that, we tend to think those surface-level functions are all there is to us. But this framework argues there is a vast, unseen geometric structure to our inner world that extends way, way beyond our immediate daily reactions. It's practically begging us to look past the superficial and really explore the profound depths of our own minds.
I want you to think for just a second about your average day. Think about that sudden frustration when you're stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, or the knot of anxiety before a big meeting, or maybe that quick flash of anger when someone cuts you off. We all experience these turbulent emotions. But the text asks a really provocative question. Are these turbulent emotions really who you are? Is your true identity actually defined by those fleeting moments of stress? The foundational premise we're breaking down today is that we make a fundamental mistake by identifying with that chaos. It suggests that these turbulent emotions are literally just surface-level reactions. They are a superficial layer that's masking something much, much deeper. So, Phase 1, the mind's surface. To figure out what lies beneath, we first have to diagnose exactly what's happening right at the outermost edge of our consciousness.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how clearly it separates what we think is our mind from what the text calls our true nature. On one side, we have the surface mind. The surface material actually breaks the surface level down into three main areas: knowledge, emotion, and will. Now, you might reasonably think that your accumulated knowledge, your deep feelings, and your strong willpower are the absolute essence of who you are. But the text is super explicit here. These are just the surface parts of the mind. They fluctuate, they get disrupted, they cause turbulence. Contrast that with the true nature. The argument here is that right beneath that volatile knowledge, emotion, and will, there is a profound, completely stable, and hidden core. The true nature of your mind isn't the choppy waves on the surface, it's the incredibly still, deep waters beneath.
Moving on to Phase 2, the root of confusion. Because look, if our knowledge, emotion, and will are constantly churning and causing us all this distress, we have to ask why.
Well, the author diagnoses our inner turmoil as stemming from a concept called ignorance,
or mumyo in the original text. But we need to be clear here. This isn't ignorance in the way we usually use the word today. It's not about a lack of formal education or just missing some facts. Rather, the text defines it as a fundamental state of lacking inner spiritual light. The word literally translates to without light. The source argues that when we are in this state of darkness, when our inner light is obscured, our knowledge, our emotions, and our willpower totally fall into confusion and disharmony. Think of it like trying to navigate a room full of furniture in the pitch black. You are inevitably going to bump into things and create a mess. That mumyo is the primary root cause of our internal turbulence.
Which brings us to phase 3, the pagoda within. If the core problem is darkness on the surface, what exactly does the structure of the light within look like? And this brilliantly illustrates the central metaphor of the entire text, the mind as a multi-storied pagoda. The source asks us to visualize our inner self not just as a single flat room, but as a towering, multi-layered structure, much like a beautiful traditional pagoda. That chaotic surface we were just talking about, that's really just the ground floor, or even just the outer walls. As you move inward and upward through these layers, you move toward a highly tranquil, brilliant core. The text suggests that every single layer, every floor of this inner pagoda represents a totally different level of spiritual capacity, awareness, and depth. The really fascinating challenge for us is to discover that pagoda within our own minds. The author urges you to ask yourself, how many floors does your inner pagoda have? And honestly, more importantly, how many of those floors are you actually using? The implication is that a lot of us spend our entire lives living exclusively on the ground floor, completely unaware of this magnificent architecture waiting to be unlocked upstairs. Phase 4. Reaching the true nature. So, knowing you have an inner pagoda is fantastic, but it's only half the battle. How do you actually get to those upper floors?
Let's move to and see how this builds a practical framework. The source outlines 3 very specific steps to descend past the surface and unlock those deeper floors. Step 1 is simply to turn your mind inward. You have to consciously shift your focus away from the external distractions and those turbulent surface emotions and really practice looking inside yourself. Step 2 requires a major shift in perspective. You have to declare that the essence of humanity is light. Instead of viewing human nature as fundamentally flawed or sinful, the text insists we have to recognize that our true core is illuminating light, which is the direct opposite of that ignorance we talked about earlier. Finally, step 3 is realizing that even light has stages. To navigate those stages, we need to learn from the lives of great people. By studying historical figures who attained high levels of spiritual clarity, we essentially give ourselves a blueprint for climbing the floors of our own inner pagoda.
And finally, phase 5. The ultimate path. If we actually follow these steps, if we turn inward, if we embrace the light and learn from those who walked the path before us, where does all of that ultimately lead? What's at the very top?
This quote, I think, perfectly captures that summit. According to the text, when you finally strip away all those turbulent emotions, the shallow surface knowledge, the stubborn will, and the darkness of ignorance, this is what you find. The true nature of the mind is a selfless, humble, path-seeking mind overflowing with love and compassion. So the crucial point is that true clarity isn't about becoming some kind of unfeeling robot. And it's certainly not about just acquiring endless academic facts. It's about reaching a state that is completely devoid of ego. It is a state of deep humility, a constant, sincere desire to seek the right path, and ultimately an existence that is completely defined by an outpouring of love and compassion for others. That is what the author ultimately defines as the true nature of human consciousness.
We have covered a truly profound journey today, moving all the way from the chaotic, emotion-driven surface of our minds, identifying that darkness of ignorance, and then discovering this incredible, multi-layered pagoda within that leads to a core of pure compassion. The framework provided by this text is both a really accurate diagnosis of our daily struggles and a majestic map for self-discovery. So, I want to leave you with this thought as we wrap up this explainer. Knowing that there is a vast, hidden architecture within you, filled with light and higher capacities just waiting to be utilized, how many floors of your inner pagoda will you unlock today? The journey inward starts whenever you're ready. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep seeking that inner light.
Let's dive right into today's explainer, where we're unpacking the actual mechanics of the unseen world. You know, if you've ever wondered how the spiritual realm functions, not just as some vague mystical concept, but as a structured system, you're going to find this incredibly fascinating. We're looking at ideas that literally bridge the gap between physical science and spiritual dimensions. We're pulling our insights directly from Ryuho Okawa's thought-provoking book, New Exploration of the Mind. This text gives us a very specific, unique perspective on human consciousness. Instead of just asking for blind faith, the author lays out a structured, almost physical framework for understanding exactly how the soul and the universe operate. Specifically, we're zeroing in on Chapter 8 today, which completely breaks down the multidimensional stages of the mind. The concepts here take those traditional, kind of fuzzy notions of the afterlife and replace them with a highly organized system that's based entirely on energy and vibration. Here is our roadmap for the explainer. 1. Dimensions of the mind. 2. Water's 3 states analogy. 3. Boiling point and higher realms. 4. Managing our daily worries. And 5. What occupies your mind? Okay, starting with Section 1, Dimensions of the Mind, the unseen structure of our spiritual reality. So what do these spiritual dimensions actually look like? Well, the text makes a crucial point right off the bat. The 4th through 9th dimensions, they aren't separated by physical floors. It's not like you're taking an elevator up some massive cosmic skyscraper. Instead, these realms are defined entirely by the distinct frequency of our mental vibrations. For instance, the 4th dimension is where spirits first arrive after leaving the physical body. It holds both the lower realms and the beginnings of spiritual awakening. As your mental vibrations rise, you reach the 5th dimension, which is categorized by a deep understanding of goodness. Then bump it up to the 6th dimension, a divine realm of self-creation and really polishing the soul. Finally, the 7th dimension shifts outward into a realm of guiding others and pure altruism. It's an entire spectrum based strictly on your spiritual frequency.
Moving on to Section 2, Water's 3 states analogy, translating invisible realms into physical science.
To really wrap our heads around these invisible realms, the source uses this brilliant everyday metaphor. Just think about water. In the same way water changes from solid ice to liquid to gas based on heat, a soul ascends through these dimensions based on its spiritual energy. The solid ice, that represents our dense, heavy physical body in the material world. When we add spiritual heat, it melts into liquid water, representing the spirit realms from the 4th all the way up to the 7th dimension. And with intense, massive heat, it turns into steam, symbolizing the absolute highest, formless realms. Now, let's zoom in on that very first major shift. The crucial point here is the melting point, 0 degrees Celsius. In this framework, this actually represents the exact moment of physical death. At 0 degrees, the physical body reaches its end, much like a solid block of ice just melting away. But the core energy, the soul itself, absolutely does not vanish. It merely changes states. It continues flowing on as water, naturally entering the spiritual dimensions. Let's look at Section 3, Boiling Point and Higher Realms, Becoming Boundless Energy. Okay, so what happens when a soul really starts to turn up the heat? Well, as a soul's light energy increases, it literally warms up. The text uses a great everyday analogy here. Imagine water heated to somewhere between 50 and 70 degrees Celsius. It's like slipping into a warm, comforting bath or taking a sip of a perfectly steeped cup of hot tea. It naturally generates feelings of warmth, gratitude, and deep happiness. This perfectly mirrors the spiritual state of the 6th dimension. It's a realm of positive self-creation where the soul just feels this profound sense of inner peace and thankfulness. But here's where things get wild. When we hit 100 degrees, the boiling point, a massive, explosive transformation occurs. We aren't just getting warmer anymore. This is a complete paradigm shift. At that boiling point, water forcefully bubbles and bursts into steam. Spiritually, the soul ceases to have a standard, defined spiritual body and instead becomes this vast cosmic energy. The text points out that water expanding into steam increases its volume hundreds, even thousands of times. This mirrors the soul entering the 8th dimension known as the Tathagata realm. Up here, the spirit is no longer confined to a single individual persona. It becomes an immense, formless, radiating energy that can influence the universe on a massive scale. It is a phenomenal way to visualize true enlightenment. Now, this entire grand physics lesson brings us to a really personal pivot. If the dimensions aren't just places you travel to, but actual states of energy that you generate, it begs a pretty important question. What exactly is your spiritual temperature right now? Which brings us to Section 4, Managing Our Daily Worries, the universal human condition. Let's bring this high-level theory right back down to earth. The text is incredibly realistic about the human condition, pointing out that practically no one on Earth is totally free from worry. Our minds are constantly, endlessly active. Without proper management, they literally behave like wild, restless horses. I mean, think about it. We spend our morning commute obsessing over things we messed up in the past. We agonizingly weigh every single present choice, and we harbor all these deep anxieties about the future. If we just let our minds run on autopilot like that, it ultimately breeds a deep sense of emptiness and keeps our spiritual temperature hovering right around freezing. To keep ourselves from staying spiritually frozen, the text lays out a clear strategy. We have to step up and become active managers of our inner world. First off, you just have to recognize the simple fact that your mind is constantly distracted. Second, you have to honestly acknowledge those toxic habits of clinging to past regrets and fearing future unknowns. And finally, you have to step in as the actual trainer of your own mind. By actively regulating your thoughts, steering them away from anger and anxiety and toward constructive, positive reflection, you actively generate that spiritual heat. You are literally raising your own vibration. And finally, Section 5. What occupies your mind? Actions speak louder than spiritual claims. So how do we actually measure our true spiritual progress? Well, the text highlights a really sharp truth regarding the gap between our ego and reality. It notes that regardless of what individuals claim about their spiritual status, even prominent religious leaders who mistakenly believe they're out there saving humanity, the truth is found entirely in their actions. Someone might subjectively perceive themselves as a high-level savior residing up in the 8th dimension, but if their objective, daily physical actions involve spewing anger, swearing, tearing people down, or acting destructively, that immediately reveals their true underlying mental frequency. It's a lower vibration. In this physics of spirituality, you literally cannot fake your temperature. Your actions are the thermometer. I'm going to leave you with this final, truly powerful realization from the text. Your dimension isn't some far-off future destination you reach after you die. It is exactly what you're choosing to think about today. Are your thoughts frozen in regret? Are they warming up with gratitude? Or are they expanding into boundless compassion? The spiritual world isn't out there. It's right inside your head. So if your actions are the thermometer, what temperature are you broadcasting to the universe right now?
Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're mapping out something truly mind-bending, a multidimensional spiritual cosmology that's just, well, it's as intricate as it is fascinating. We're unpacking the profound concepts in Chapter 9 of the New Investigation of the Mind, specifically focusing on what the author calls the pinnacle of the mind. You know, whether you're approaching this as philosophy, theology, or honestly just a really wild thought experiment, the framework we're going to explore offers a staggering new lens on human consciousness. We're going to break down the very nature of truth, climb from the 4th dimension all the way up to the 10th, and explore how these massive cosmic structures actually relate to your everyday choices.
Right off the bat, the text drops this totally audacious idea. The ultimate of the mind is the essence of God, a pursuit of rightness. Just think about the sheer scale of that claim for a second. It suggests that finding true rightness in our everyday mundane lives literally leads us to the very essence of the divine. It's drawing this direct, unbroken line between our personal, daily struggles to do the right thing and the grand, overarching structure of the entire universe. So, what exactly lies at the absolute pinnacle of the human mind? Well, let's dive into that question by embarking on an ascent. We're going to map out a journey that starts with grounded, earthy human experiences and scales all the way up to a staggering 10-dimensional cosmos. By the end of this explainer, you'll see exactly how the author connects a simple, everyday human choice to massive planetary consciousness.
Section 1. The Pursuit of Rightness. The Dynamic Nature of Truth.
We start our journey not out in the cosmos somewhere, but right here on Earth, with the deeply personal pursuit of what the text calls a righteous heart. But here's the kicker, and I love this part. The text completely rejects a rigid binary rulebook. Rightness isn't presented as some simple, flat set of rules that applies the exact same way to everyone in every situation. No way. Instead, it's highly dynamic. The author uses these brilliant tactile metaphors to explain this. Think about grinding traditional ink for calligraphy. You add water, you grind the ink stick, but you have to find the exact perfect shade and consistency for the specific character you're about to write on that specific paper in that exact moment. If it's too dark, it's wrong. If it's too watery, wrong again. Or think of a beehive. Every single worker bee has a specific, unique hexagonal cell that it belongs to and operates from. Rightness is incredibly individualized. It's perfectly tailored to your unique circumstances, your specific cell in the massive hive of life.
Moving to Section 2, The Elephant and the Divine, the Limits of Human Perception.
But as we seek this highly individualized rightness and try to understand the broader divine truth, we hit a massive wall of human limitation. Because let's face it, our perception is incredibly narrow. The author illustrates this by bringing up that ancient parable of the blind man and the elephant. If you ask people to define ultimate truth or the essence of the Son of God, their answers are entirely limited by what they can physically touch. One person grabs the trunk and swears the divine is a hose, and they're totally ready to argue about it. Another feels the belly and goes, no, it's clearly a drum. Another hugs the leg and insists it's a pillar, while the one holding the tail swears it's a whip. The point here is that humans usually only grasp a tiny, fragmented fraction of a massive, multidimensional truth, and we so often stubbornly mistake that tiny fragment for the whole shebang.
So the really crucial takeaway is that to truly understand the whole elephant, to step back and see the full picture without all that bias, you need a structured, progressive framework. And that is exactly what the text provides, beautifully laid out in this original table of contents. It maps out a deliberate, step-by-step ladder. Just look at how points 1 through 10 visually represent this climb. We move from the foundational pursuit of rightness, up through the stages of the mind and varying dimensions, all the way to breaking down the actual essence of God. It's just an incredibly systematic way to chart the uncharted.
Section 3. Dimensions of the Mind. Climbing from the 4th to the 10th dimension.
Let's take a look at how this builds into the author's intricate multidimensional ladder. The text describes spiritual realms not as vague, floating clouds, but as highly organized layers. Imagine a massive high-rise apartment building where the floor you live on is dictated entirely by the wavelength of your mind. We start in the 4th dimension, which is a post-death realm where spirits hold on to earthly desires and unpurified emotions. And yes, this includes the lower hell realms. Now, as a mind purifies and awakens to goodness, it ascends to the 5th dimension. Above that is the 6th dimension, a brilliant realm of truth and light, described as the domain of angels and those deeply seeking knowledge. This progression continues all the way up to the 8th dimension. And what's truly fascinating here, actually kind of mind-blowing, is that the text notes the 8th dimension is the absolute highest level where souls still retain a recognizable form. Meaning, up to the 8th dimension, beings still have a spiritual body with arms, legs, and a face. Beyond this floor of the high-rise, things get incredibly abstract.
And that brings us to the leap into the ultimate abstract. Because when we reach the 9th dimension, that spiritual body disappears entirely. It becomes a realm of pure, formless energy. The text identifies this as the domain of the ultimate saviors and guides of humanity. Figures like Jesus, Buddha, and Moses are said to reside at this energetic frequency, existing as pure spiritual light. But, believe it or not, it goes even higher. The 10th dimension is described not as individual historical beings at all, but as massive, overarching planetary consciousness. We are literally talking about the living, breathing mind of the Earth itself, the consciousness of the moon, the mind of the sun. It is a staggering scale of existence that's almost incomprehensible to us down here on the ground. This, right here, this is the true pinnacle of the mind.
Section 4. The 4 Essences of God. Deconstructing the Divine.
Okay, so having reached the absolute top of this dimensional ladder, the literal peak of the cosmos, the author then does something incredibly helpful. Rather than just leaving the divine as this untouchable, mysterious cloud, the text breaks down the essence of God itself into accessible, universal concepts, and it does so without demanding you subscribe to any one specific theology. It defines this ultimate essence through 4 distinct steps. First, God is defined as light, but specifically as a sustaining life energy that physically and spiritually nurtures everything in the universe, kind of like photosynthesis for the soul. Second, it's a grand sense of purpose, an evolutionary driving force pushing the cosmos constantly toward progress and harmony. Third, it's the sheer power of creation, the literal ability to manifest reality and build worlds through thought and will alone. And finally, the 4th essence is universal laws, the ultimate standards of value and the underlying physics of the spiritual realm that govern how absolutely everything interacts.
Section 5. Discoveries at the Pinnacle, tying the journey together.
Now you might be wondering, how does all this grand cosmology actually help us on a random Tuesday? Well, this brings us full circle to the results of our initial, personal, human pursuit of the righteous heart. The author suggests that when you reach the pinnacle of your own mind, when you finally find that exact perfect shade of ink for your specific life, you make 4 profound discoveries. And notice how perfectly they mirror those 4 essences of God we just talked about. First, you discover self-awareness of yourself as an eternal life energy. Second, you discover your personal alignment with the cosmic principle of progress and harmony. Third, you cultivate your own internal
internal creative power to manifest good. And fourth, you naturally acquire an intuitive understanding of universal laws and values. Basically, the text is telling us that discovering true rightness isn't about following some external rulebook. It's about aligning your internal self with the very elements that make up the fabric of the divine.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to really ponder. Regardless of your personal, religious, or philosophical beliefs, the framework presented here is absolutely breathtaking in its scope. If you were to adopt this vast, multi-dimensional perspective, seeing your smallest, daily choices as ripples that connect upward through dimensions, all the way to a universal life energy and a planetary mind, how might that change the way you define your own rightness today? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating text with me. Keep asking those big questions and keep seeking your own perfect shade of ink.